Welcome to a brand new episode of Show Me the Crypto. This week is a great conversation with Railgun co-founder Alan Scott. We dive into all things privacy and crypto. Alf, thoughts on the episode?
And we jumped into everything about privacy, which is often misunderstood in the crypto space by a lot of people. It's commonly misunderstood that crypto's super private, when in fact, it's quite public. And so we dive into all of that with Alan, more at a high level, understanding privacy in the crypto space and even comparing it to traditional finance and our day-to-day lives. But then we get into the more technical side of it, what's being developed currently in crypto to push privacy forward, where could it go in the future? And then we move into Railgun, which is what Alan's been building, and how Railgun's technology is pushing privacy forward and providing more and more options for users and protocols to take on privacy and implement it in different ways.
Yeah, this is an important conversation because I think sometimes in crypto, privacy gets this negative connotation that it's a bunch of bad actors trying to hide what they're doing. But if we take something as basic as cash versus crypto, cash is way more private. I mean, crypto, you can still track so much. And it's crazy to think if you were in a real life conversation and somebody came up after you purchased a coffee and said, how much money do you have in your bank account? That would be an offensive thing to ask. We would never give that person that information. It would make us very uncomfortable. Yet in crypto, there are pretty easy ways to go about this using Etherscan and dive into somebody's wallet, get a lot of information. This opens us up to potential phishing scams and all sorts of danger. So privacy is incredibly important. And Alan is part of the team that's trying to make this a better situation. We know you'll love this episode.
Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews of some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by Railgun co-founder Alan Scott. Dubbed by the Railgun DAO as the janitor based on his ability to tackle any non-code writing related tasks, Alan has worked in the financial sectors of Tokyo and the US and considers himself a staunch advocate of privacy. Railgun is a smart contract system that enables zero-knowledge privacy for Ethereum and EVMs. Alan, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to a fun conversation.
We're looking forward to it as well. And Alan, I want to get started because doing a bit of research for this pod, my understanding is that you started as a Degen trader and that your launch into privacy actually came as a bit of an ego play because you understood somebody was tracking your wallet and you didn't want others to see when you had been rugged. So I know this is a big question, but can you kind of walk us through your discovery of crypto and how you got to this point?
Yeah, you sort of hit the nail on the head. I mean, primarily it was based on like trading. I worked in the more like financial world before this, TradFi, if you will. And, really got excited about crypto because it was like really high volatility, which is just great if you're into like swing trading or something like this. And that eventually led me down the rabbit hole off of the exchanges into DeFi, the whole ICO thing, DeFi summer. And I guess, are you guys into any of the cool like Telegram groups? I'm sure you find yourself into some where people talk about like the different things that they're trading and stuff like this. And I ended up getting a DM out of one of those. And then, it was somebody I, kind of known in the chat. And they were like, oh, how did you get into token X? And I was like, oh, wow, how did this guy know this? And he ended up like, walking me through how he found my wallet on Etherscan. Right. And so yeah, it kind of made me like very like aware of like just how not private crypto is, and we can kind of see that's like the even like the pseudonymous nature of crypto is eroding very rapidly. You have companies like Nansen, Chainalysis, Elliptic, TRM Labs. The list goes on. Like these companies that are out to collect, collate, and sell your data are even applying artificial intelligence to the blockchain to make it even less private than it was. And so it's kind of become really obvious, at least to me, that like in order for like crypto to have like really good mainstream adoption, we have to have some sort of privacy element built into it in order for it to be successful and adopted by the likes of things like JP Morgan or your average everyday mom and pop shop. If we want to buy things in crypto, do things in crypto, the boring things, if you will, like just paying people, we have to have some sort of privacy, or I think that will really limit the market that we can attack.
What was the main way that he was able to find your wallet, or maybe some of the steps that were taken?
Yeah. So like it was a Telegram group that was like token gated. And so like, I don't know if you guys have heard of like Collabland, but there's a bot that you can use to like token gate a chat. And that really narrows it down. If you're in like a Telegram group of like 100 people, that kind of takes the sample size down to 100 different wallets. And based on the things that I had been talking about, being excited about in crypto at the time, he had just basically made a really good educated guess, because the tokens that I was really into at the time were really like small cap, high propensity to moon or whatever, right? And so it was really just a matter of like surfing Etherscan. And we kind of all do this like naturally in crypto. Like if you like play in the crypto land, or like, Wade, maybe you buy beers and somebody sends you tokens to your address. I don't know what you do, but what I do is I immediately go to Etherscan and then proceed to judge them on my phone, like for all the things that they've done in crypto, like based on that particular wallet. And so that's sort of like voyeurism is really like cute and fun, but like the reality is like that really doesn't fly in finance. Like that's pretty abnormal when it comes to like the traditional rails. So if you use things like PayPal or Venmo or Cash App, or just regular old wire transfers, like if I send you guys money in traditional finance, I don't know what's in your bank account. I have no clue. But that's not the case in crypto. And so that's kind of like been like the mission or like the ethos of people like contributing to this project is like, how do we get this like wallet side privacy into crypto so it acts and behaves more like people would expect and makes people more comfortable with using it? Because without privacy, I think a lot of people, when it comes to their finances, would be really bashful to use an ecosystem where they don't have any.
Well, and what comes to mind is kind of 2021 when the NFT hype was taking off, and everyone was searching for like what's going to be that next Bored Ape, or what's going to be the next collection that pops off. And so a lot of influential people, their wallets that were known as public wallets were just being watched. And as soon as they would buy a collection, a lot of other people would buy a collection. And so like beyond the judging, which I've also done for sure, but it's kind of like people were doing this almost as an investment strategy as well, trying to jump the curve on what others were investing with when it came to NFTs.
Dude, 100%. Even before NFTs, right? I mean, like you would take and look for like influential wallets on like Etherscan that were taking and successfully buying like the proverbial, crap coins, if you will. We'll keep it a little PG here, but suffice it to say, like, if you saw like a very successful wallet was within like the first 100 holders of a token, like you would ape into that, right? You'd be really excited. Like this dude knows what's up. Whoever this is, 0x fill in the blank, like this person knows what's up, right? And so you kind of have like really artificial price discovery for assets. And like this creates problems in the market, right? So for example, like in the NFT boom, there were collections that went really big because influential wallets bought them, but they didn't go anywhere, right? So you have like this initial yeet up into the moon and then like a heavy collapse because there actually wasn't like real asset value there, right? And so like without this sort of like privacy or anonymity in this like auction environment, like you can create a lot of challenges for like what traditional finance people would call like true price discovery. And even like during the last like crash in crypto, right? We could see like, especially if you're like really watching Twitter, like you would see a lot of people going on and like saying like, oh man, this dude's about to get liquidated, right? If the price goes down to like 1815 on Ethereum, this dude's going to get liquidated. Like that shouldn't be the case, right? Like it should be nobody's business, like where I have a loan, right, in the ecosystem. Now it's totally okay to be able to see that at the protocol level, but to be able to identify that at like an individual level, I think is a little bit toxic, at least in my opinion. And so like for me, like the perfect amount of privacy is like actor privacy, but being able to have something like protocol level transparency, right? And this is really cool because it allows you to take and look and say, hey, like, are the loans in Aave actually healthy, and are the mechanisms that are like responsible for keeping them healthy working? I can audit that on chain, right? I can look at that on chain, and that's a really cool thing. If a stablecoin says it's backed by certain assets, I can look at that on chain. That doesn't mean that like I should be able to take and look at all of your assets, Wade, for example, on chain and like judge you because you're using a specific protocol. And so like this sort of like bifurcation of like what things should be public and what things should be private, again, is kind of where like we're kind of trying to strive to be able to, bring privacy to the marketplace.
I don't want to jump too far ahead, but, to go off that, what you were just talking about, at what point does the sort of value that we get in on-chain data and what it tells and what we can do with it from an analysis and storytelling standpoint, there's a lot of value we get from the on-chain data that's accessible thanks to the fact these are public ledgers and the information is there. I'm skipping way ahead right now, but like if we get to a point where like privacy is far more built in and native to crypto transactions, do we now lose a lot of the value that we currently have with, the fact that this is visible to us and accessible?
So I think the answer is you definitely lose some granularity to like the access or your information access, right? So in other words, like, we can't take and see directly into individual wallets, right? This would be, if I could wave a magic wand into the future, it would have it would be very akin to what we experience in traditional finance, right? So for example, let's say I'm interacting with the company Starbucks, right? What do? I go in, I buy a coffee, I swipe my debit card, and the barista says, the Ingenco terminal says approved, and they hand me my coffee and I go about my business, right? Now, what do they learn about me personally, financially? I have at least enough money to buy a coffee. Like that's what they know about me, right? And I think that's the perfect amount of information for them to have. And on the other hand of that, right, I can actually go and look at like the 10K statements of this publicly traded company, Starbucks, right? So I can go, for people who don't know what 10K statements are, they're basically like the audited like SEC filings for this publicly traded company. It offers things like their financial health, right? So I can know if they have like cash on hand, this sort of thing, right? And, this is really, really valuable on the investment side of things, right? And so I don't think that like history repeats itself and we go down the traditional finance rails again, but I think we'll have something very akin to that where we can still audit the different protocols that we use and be able to take and look on chain. And again, see like that DAI is backed by, X different, different assets, et cetera. And I can look at that on chain and see that that's happening, right? And I can verify that like the liquidations that should be happening on a lending protocol are happening, or that like, that a token that I want to invest in doesn't have an unlimited supply or something like this, right? And so there could be like some permanent minting, or I can go and look and see who has admin rights over a particular smart contract that I want to use. So if I wanted to use something like Railgun, is it controlled by an admin? Now, the answer is no for Railgun. There are no admin keys or anything like this. It's all decentralized. But you should be able to audit that stuff on chain. And so I think that that's like the more important type of transparency, because crypto is really big on transparency, right? I think, and that's an important and beautiful thing, right? But I don't think that transparency should translate and have purview into the individual actor. I'm in the U.S. You guys are close by as well, and we live in pretty cool places, I would argue, right? At least financially, right? We don't have to worry about too many things, right? I can go out and get a car loan, a mortgage. I could do all sorts of things. I have a pretty good financial infrastructure around me, but that's not the case everywhere, right? And there's also people who are in not so free places in the world, right? And so having that kind of purview and transparency into the individual, I think is a really dangerous thing if we consider it globally, right? If I maybe I'm slightly too old for that generation, but if I check my American privilege, right, and I think about it for a second, there's a couple of places around the world that you could get mugged over $100 in your crypto account, and those places are using peer-to-peer crypto on a very large scale, right, where they've experienced hyperinflation and things like this. And so we kind of got to be cognizant of that. We have to kind of appreciate that transparency at that level maybe isn't good. And yeah, it definitely help. It doesn't it's not as fun because you can't follow Tetranode's wallet and all these other cool things. But I think that the benefits vastly outweigh the cons there.
Despite the fact that it's already the time we're in right now is quite transparent and whatnot, and you can see a lot through Etherscan, through looking at other people's wallets, why do you think privacy in crypto has such a bad connotation? If you think of the general public, there's this assumption or maybe this narrative that there's a bunch of bad actors in the space using these funds for bad things. Why do you think that is when it comes to crypto? There's that negative connotation.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a bit torn in my answer. I'll try to give you guys my wholehearted, honest opinion, right? But it's really two sides of a coin, right? Because I see that there's definitely there's a state of the union around privacy that's really toxic, and it sounds kind of tinfoil hatty, but the reality is the framing of the surveillance state in modern society is sort of toxic, right? And it's really hard to argue against because it's under the veil and justified by the guise of getting the bad guys, which is well and good until you as an individual or your set of people, however you're putting yourself in a box, right, gets to be deemed the bad guy, right? And this is really a bit of a challenge, right? Again, I'm not saying in a tinfoil hat that I think the American government is watching me or something like this. But we have to put ourselves in other people's shoes who are in less fortunate regimes around the world, right? This is not I'm not that big of a tinfoil hat wearer under this beanie that I got, but suffice it to say, we have to appreciate that there's other places in the world where these people need privacy in order to not be scooped up by the government and have all their money taken from them, right? It could be really bad, right? And so we have to kind of think about it more globally when it comes to crypto, right? And even in places where pervasive surveillance isn't seen as a bad thing, right? People will say things I have nothing to hide, or I'm not a bad actor and I could share my things. And, that might be well and good, but that's saying that I've never done, a single thing or had a single thought that could be misinterpreted to, put me in a difficult situation in the future. And that's a bit of a challenge as well. And so I think that we have to first appreciate that we have a pretty privileged place in the world, and the things that we see in our free societies as being correct and true could get you killed in other parts of the world, right? And especially when it comes to money, where people are, literally fighting for scraps to live, right? But on the other side of the coin, I would say that like privacy is gaining a ton of traction, and it's getting better and better, and like the technology around it is becoming like far better than it ever has been. So like a lot of like the really cool cryptography that at least I'm interested in started out in the early 90s. And if we fast forward to today, there's like light years like in between that technology in the 90s and what we have, today in, 2023. There's all sorts of really cool stuff. Like the guys that, researching on Zcash have made it, easier than ever to be able to do like zero knowledge stuff. There's stuff like Manta, which has like really cool, zero knowledge technology. There's things like Railgun, where you can take and have like a private EOA where you can transact privately in DeFi. It's really easy to set up like an SSL certificate. The list goes on. Like encryption has never been easier to do. In fact, like a lot of the things around like, messaging, the thing that we're recording this on has end-to-end encryption, which is pretty cool. We have the ability to have credit card information online, and we type and buy things on Amazon, and that's great too. And so like, it's definitely like a two-sided coin. We have to constantly like push against like the surveillance narrative, and make sure that people understand that like privacy is a really good societal value. It's something that's very, very important for us to like continue to fight for, especially even if we don't believe that we live in some sort of state where we could have malicious actors, hold our financial transactions above us, or we can, consider other people around the world that might not be afforded that same freedom.
What's your take on, for those who, and this is maybe argued more for those not in crypto or maybe new to crypto, but when you think about privacy, and especially when you maybe learn for the first time that crypto is not as private as maybe you assumed it was, the conversation around cash versus crypto comes up at some point. It's always, the one comparison. So what is more private and why?
Well, I think there's nothing more private than assuming that you have a big wad of cash in your hand and you give it to some other individual in person. I guess if we want to get like really pedantic about the side channels, your phone is like, triangulating you with like cell towers, and like you probably have the GPS on your phone, like that kind of thing, right? And so like they at least know like we ran into each other or something like this, right? But I would definitely say that cash by a landslide is far more private, and we're kind of seeing that like being eroded away. Not to get like too nerdy about like cash, but like I think it was in 1984. I'm sure somebody in the comments somewhere will completely correct me if I'm wrong on this, but like there was this new rule that came up in the US called 6050I, I think it was. It was around cash reporting standards, right? And this was around like, it was basically saying that any cash transaction of $10,000 or more, or any suspicious transaction had to be reported to the IRS, right? And like, that's really cool. But like, by, just by way of like time and inflation, like that's like drastically shrunk in like purchasing power, right? So like now that's like just shy of like $3,000 worth of purchasing power in 1984, right? So vastly smaller sum, right? $10,000 used to go a long way. We've all seen the memes. And so like, we've kind of seen like the viability of cash, like just by regulation, like shrinking over time. And so like, we have to kind of, I think we should be working towards like building like an internet cache. And I think that's something that's really, really important. And I think the folks like, Monero are going after that. And, the folks at Zcash, again, are going after that. And I think it's a good thing. I think we have to have that in the future, especially in the digital world, as like your propensity to use like cash is definitely less. I mean, when's the last time you guys used cash for something?
Yeah, a while ago.
Dude, I can't even think of the last time I paid for cash, like, pay for something cash. And so
I use it when I somehow get it by circumstance, like I'm forced to be given cash. And then I'm like, okay, well, I either hold this for the next 6 months to a year, or I just like get rid of it and like spend it on the next thing.
Or like there's things where that you used to kind of have to use cash for. So like I'll give you an example, very Canadian example. I was at a local hockey game the other day, and like you're used to like, you know, you get the beer from the person or like the 50-50 or like, so I'm like, I got to take cash out. And which was just ludicrous because like they come and they're just like they're expecting tap or whatever, right? Like they're like
exactly.
they're like, you have cash, like, and I'm like, I thought I needed it for the game, right? Like,
right. And so like that's kind of like eroding, you know, which is wildly convenient, by the way. You know, what's more, you know, easy to do in a transaction other than like tap your card and they give you the beer, right? This is perfect, right? But I think that like, you know, if like crypto rails are going to take over, we have to like make sure that we have that like consideration, right? Because like that, like now, you know, Bank Secrecy Act and all these like different like, you know, banking tracking mechanisms and the substrate aside, like at the surface level, there is privacy for like people. And like, I think, you know, at least in between actors. So like you tapping your card doesn't reveal that you have $10,000 in the bank, or that was like you overdrafting your bank account. Like there's no one knows, right? That's none of their business. And so like we currently don't have that kind of mechanism, at least in the DeFi ecosystem outside of, you know, what's being developed at, you know, Railgun. So, I think cash is a good thing, but I think it's going the way of the dodo bird, right? It's kind of dead.
So Alan, I'm curious what some of the top risks are around a lack of privacy. So, I mean, one obvious thing that comes to mind is somebody is able to peek into your wallet, sees that you have a lot of value, and then you maybe become a target of like phishing scams or different things of trying to get you to, you know, give up your keys or whatever it is so they can get access to that. But are there any other risks beyond that? Like, is there anything I'm missing there?
Yeah, I think like the number one thing is what you've just said, right? Like people having public wallets makes them a target, and it makes them a target for the worst of it, right? The number one like exploit in crypto is like social engineering. It's phishing. It's like taking and putting tokens into someone's like wallet, and it's like an airdrop, right? And then they go to do something with those airdrop tokens. And before you know it, there's like a malicious approval, and you see them on like Telegram or Twitter or something, you know, saying like, oh my God, my life savings, it's gone away. Like, you know, I don't know what happened. All my tokens are leaving my wallet and they're going to this address, right? It's really bad, right? That's like a awful part of crypto. And so anybody who's listening to this who might be new, there's no such thing as free money. Assume everything is like a scam in crypto. Like if I give anybody any advice, like it's just everyone on the internet is trying to scam you. Like just assume that it's a scam. Like even if your mom reaches out to you in today's world, right, with, you know, AI and this sort of thing, right? Like you should assume scam. And so like, yeah, scams are like the number one thing, right? And they do that by taking and targeting your wallet. But I think also too, if you're a trader, right, if you're a little bit more sophisticated trader, people taking and like stealing your alpha is a really big risk. There's these things like Nansen where like they literally, I'll never forget, I was at a conference. I wonder if I still have it somewhere, but I was at a conference and they gave out these eye masks, you know, for like sleeping on an airplane or something like this. And it said, don't sleep on alpha, use Nansen or something like this, right? And like that was like their whole thing. And so it's like you could like take and, you know, type in someone's name, right, that you found famous, you know, like Tetranode, and then like pull up Tetranode's wallets and show what Tetranode's investing in and all these different things. And I think that that's not really great because it erodes alpha. So if you've developed some sort of like sophisticated trading strategy, this means that like your cool alpha is going to be eroded, which isn't really great. I think too, like on the other side of things, if you think about it, just from like a mechanical perspective, I don't think that we'll see like a lot of like mainstream adoption without some sort of like wallet side privacy. I think that the last thing that you're going to convince like a store to do is like open up their entire bank account to the world and say like, yeah, send your payment for your Jamba Juice to jambajuice.eth. Right. I think that that's like a very wild assumption that people are going to just like, you know, hand out their bank statements onto a public ledger. And so I think that like the biggest risk is that it actually hinders adoption over the long term. So like individual risk from like pervasive surveillance of bad actors aside, like I think that it's an adoption issue. If we don't have privacy for people to participate in commerce, like the regular old negotiation process just sort of erodes away if you can just go and look and see how much is in the counterparty's balance. So yeah, I would say that that's like the biggest risk factor is adoption.
On that subject of adoption, I feel like there's this weird aspect to privacy in crypto where the sort of the picture that is painted excuse me, around, you go to Starbucks, you pay for your coffee, and all they know is that you had enough money for your coffee and that you bought a coffee. When you think about in crypto and you use that analogy and you talk about how that's not the case with our wallets and our transactions, I think fairly unanimously, everyone would agree, yeah, no, that would be nice. Like, why isn't it like that? That seems normal. That's what we're all already used to and have been our entire lives outside of crypto. Why is it not like that? It sure would be nice if it was one day. Yeah, for the time that crypto's been around, obviously privacy tech is being built, but that still isn't the norm. So why is it taking so long for that future that we can all imagine that makes a whole lot of sense? Why isn't it here yet?
That's a very fair assessment of the state of things, right? I pretty much tend to agree that and I think it's because privacy has kind of been set aside for somebody else to figure out for other economic pursuits. It's a challenge. Cryptography in general is super complex. It's very, 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 very hard. And developing financial technology is very, very, very hard, right? In fact, we could see that it's very hard because there's a new exploit at least once a quarter, something dastardly has happened and $1 million has been, yoinked off into, no man's land. And it's wildly unfortunate. And so I think, first of all, the technology being built is really difficult. And then I think to stack privacy on top of that is really, really a big challenge. And so the point of, Railgun, right, is to try to bring that barrier for entry down to have that private wallet and have it be based on a smart contract system. And have it not have bridging or some sort of L2 assumption. It's on the ecosystem that you're using, this sort of thing, right? And it's definitely a decently long-term effort, right? I think this project broke ground in call it late 2020, contracts deployed early 21. It's been a constant iteration of now there's a soon to be V3 coming out that'll make it even simpler and cheaper and lower that barrier for entry for other developers to use that developer kit and add privacy into their dApp. But it's definitely an uphill battle, and it has to do with the complexity of it. So how do you distill that down, make it easier for people to do? You need a team of really, really smart contributors around the world coming together to build something that is then distilled down, that is, even the least of us engineer can take and use. And that takes a lot of time, right? So even with the Internet of Things, so if we kind of akin it to something else, right? HTTPS, right? Most people leave websites immediately that don't have an SSL cert, right? They just kind of all right, I'm gonna get out of here, right? This doesn't seem like kind of place for me, right? That took a while to get to be where it was easy enough for just everybody to do, right? And so, when did SSL come out? That was Netscape era, so 1997, 1998. So that took I'd call it at least a decade. And so this is arguably more complicated than that. And so I think it's just a matter of time. like this stuff, like we're really excited, and people tend to want things to happen really quickly. But the reality is like this kind of development takes time. So like we kind of have to have like a bit of patience. I think the adoption curve for privacy will like be quick, relatively speaking, but technology takes time to be adopted. Like when you were talking about Wade earlier, like tapping your card to like get a beer. Like when do you think like the first credit card was invented?
Wasn't it going back to like the 60s or something like that? Or
even earlier, 1950. It was the Diners Club, right?
Yeah,
so like
Diners
Club.
Crazy.
Yeah, so a long time ago, over 70 years ago, right? That was the first credit card. And so like from there to here where we're like tapping for beers, very long haul, right? Insanely long haul. In fact, our parents probably remember like the credit card carbon paper things. You guys remember those maybe?
Dude, I remember it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I get on these with people who are like a lot younger than me, but suffice to say, like clack, clack, like, and so like that stuff, it's a long iterative process. And so like we have to have patience with it, and we have to really be focused on it from the building side, right? So like people want this. It's very obvious, right? You guys hit the nail on the head. Like it's very true that like privacy at this level, like is obviously wanted and needed. It's just a matter of like keeping builders focused on it. And I think that we're still, years away. I think maybe if the Earth, Moon, Sun, and stars all align, like we'll have like some, really cool EIP around Ethereum that says like it'll be like the Railgun EIP. That'd be pretty cool.
And just a second part to that question, because I think part of the point I was making is I understand that it takes time to develop. It seems like, at least from an outsider's perspective, that there just isn't a lot of development actually happening in the privacy tech side of crypto, at least when you compare it to all, like, let's say all the finance, DeFi, NFTs, gaming, everything. Is that because if true, is that because it's not as sexy, or is it because it's a bigger challenge? Is that much harder? What are your thoughts on that side of things?
So, yeah. So I would say that there's definitely like a lot of stuff that's going out in like the privacy world. In fact, if you're really curious about it, maybe you can throw this in the show notes. But there's this project that just came out called Web3 Privacy. That's what they call it, right? And I think they have a Twitter or something like this, but they basically like outline all of like the really cool things that are happening in privacy in excruciating detail, right? They have all the different like DeFi stuff. They have all like the different L2 stuff. They have all the different messaging things and all these really cool things. Like they go into like really deep detail on all the stuff that's happening. And so I would say that like the reason why it feels like there's not like a lot of development is because most of this stuff isn't something that you like really directly and inherently interact with. Like you don't experience interacting with like a new recursive zero knowledge mechanism, right? It's just in that substrate. This is really deep tech, right? And so it's not really in your face. Like it's kind of like an SSL cert. Like when you go to Amazon, like it having an SSL cert is not the focus of Amazon's website, right? It's to buy things and ship it to your house in like 24 hours, right? That's like the main focus of it. And so there's a lot of really cool things that are being developed, but I will say on the other side of that, it's definitely not as popular. I totally agree. And it has to do with exactly what you said. It is wildly complicated. So like the new NU5 upgrade for Zcash took some of the most advanced cryptographers on the planet a very long time to develop, and now they have the ability to do no trusted setup, zero knowledge, and this is a huge win for cryptography. There's a lot of really, really cool things that are happening around privacy. It's just maybe it's not as like in your face as like the protocols that are more exciting, like the ones that I'm into, right? Which is drag leverage bar to the right, click green button. Like that's the kind of stuff that I think is a little bit more like in your face and like has that like interactions from like degens like us.
I want to dive a bit deeper into Railgun and what the tech's all about. But to start that off, I mean, one of the trajectories Ulf and I have for the show is that, we want it to be really unintimidating content for people who are maybe brand new to this space. So with that in mind, if you were explaining Railgun to somebody who had very, very limited crypto knowledge, how would you explain it? And how can somebody start using that technology?
Yeah, so it's the easiest way to understand, like, forget all of the cool, like, zero knowledge, forget the Merkle trees and all of this really different Poseidon hashes and all this really complicated technology. The fundamental thing that is the easiest to understand is Railgun makes it possible to have an incognito wallet. So just like whenever you go on your browser and you hit Control-Shift-N, right, and you open up the incognito mode, you can do the same thing with your DeFi wallet. And Railgun does that with encryption and smart contracts. And it's all handled on what's known as the client side. So all this happens on your computer. So it is like truly private. It's only happening on your machine. You're not hitting some sort of like Railgun server or something like this. It's all like, really, really privacy oriented tech. And that's really the premise of what this is, right? So what you can do is you can take and there's a couple of different front ends for this kind of thing. So there's one that was built by the community, which I think is really cool, called Terminal Wallet. Pretty cool. It's like if you're into it, like a command line interface, very Matrix looking, so like if you show it to your friends, like they'll think you're really, really cool. It's actually really easy to use. And then there's another team called Railway. They're building a wallet that has like this incognito mode built into it as well. And then, all you do is you take and you put tokens into your incognito balance, your 0ZK address, and then you can interact with the protocols that have like integrated this. And so you can take in swap tokens, you can take and do, I think there's like beefy vaults, you can provide LP. There's a bunch of different, integrations that have happened already. And there'll be like more and more and more in the future. And so like the different things that you can do with your private balance of tokens will grow over time as more and more people integrate this. And that's really the soup to nuts of it. It's really cool. It's a bit different than a lot of different privacy protocols that people have experienced. So for example, like it acts truly like a private wallet. And that's really, really cool, right? So like what it allows you to have is like an activity log, like you would experience in something like MetaMask or something like that. Now it's all encrypted, but what's really cool about that is you can share that with other people, right? So if you need to, like, let's say you have an accountant and you want to like be able to share your private balance with them, you can, generate what's known as a view only key, and people can take and, view the transactions that you're doing. So you can take and, have your accountant do that kind of stuff. If you're not into accountants, there's actually the ability to export a CSV of this stuff, and you can use Coinly or do it yourself. And so like there's like a tax compliance integration, if you will. There's all sorts of really, really neat stuff around Railgun. And like the goal of like the people contributing to this is to make something that's like really easy to integrate, like transparently familiar for people. So it feels just like a normal public wallet and is like uncompromisingly private and secure. And so that's kind of like Railgun in a nutshell. It's the incognito wallet smart contract.
I've used Railway, the Railway app, and
oh, nice.
Yeah, and it's super cool, and it's quite easy to work with. But I will say, when I first started looking into it, I was trying to understand Railgun and Railway, and I'm like, how does this all work? And my big question in the back of my head, I still remember, is like, is this safe? Like, am I going to get scammed here? Or is this, you talk about like assume everything's a scam in crypto. I'm like,
great.
Yeah. I'm like, am I going to get rugged if I use this thing? And understanding how Railgun works, or in this case, I guess how Railway works with Railgun tech, was hard to wrap my head around. It was difficult for me to understand, like, how is me depositing and connecting my wallet and then depositing it into this private wallet? How does that work? And how is that then obfuscated, keeping everything private? And how does this work when you get more technical from a DeFi standpoint? Like learning that I could then still do interact with provide liquidity and swap tokens and stuff. I was like, holy crap, this is really cool. It's more functionality than I thought it had. But wrapping my head around all that was intimidating. And so the question is that's like a whole nother hurdle when we think about onboarding users into privacy. Does that just need to get, and maybe they won't all think about it like I do when there's more trust for brands and things like that. But how does that get overcome, the intimidation factor of users having to go through extra steps to be private and get
definitely. Yes, I think it's definitely it's come a long way already in the just right at 3 years that this has been around, right? So originally it was not great. It was really difficult to use. Proof generation took almost a minute. It was not great. So the beta, if you will, right? Or maybe the first version, however you want to classify it, it doesn't really matter. But those contracts still exist. You can still generate proofs and use them, and it's all decentralized. There's no shutting it down. But it's an iterative process, right? And so currently, I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is very much so advanced user kind of stuff, right? There's steps involved. There's approvals. There's getting your head around why it works, how it works. Is it trustworthy? And so with Railgun, there's no admin. It's been pretty aggressively audited. I think there's been 15 different audits at this point. So it's been beaten to death over and over and over again by Trail of Bits, Zokyo, Hashcloak, ABDK. The list goes on. Lots of different places have looked at this code, and I think that what'll happen over time, and what I hope will happen over time, is this SDK can be integrated into the wallets that people are familiar with, right? So, for example, you could have MetaMask incognito mode. That people are really familiar with, and because everybody knows MetaMask, right? It seems to be, right? And so there could be an incognito mode supported by Railgun, and I think you kind of got to get to that point, right? And so I think it's a matter of time, and I hope that if I compare it to where it was 2.5 years ago, the barrier for entry has never been lower, and I see that it's going to continue to get lower. As people learn and develop and get feedback on what works, what doesn't work with Railgun. So gas was a big consideration early on. It was really quite expensive to do a Railgun operation, and it's been driven down a ton. There's going to be a new upgrade in I think maybe January, February, something like that. That'll be proposed and deployed. That should lower that gas cost even more. There's different other substrate technology that'll help even more. And so over time, as it gets easier to use, it'll get cheaper to use. And my only hope is that the people who are developing these getting ends can take in feedback like this. And so hopefully make it even easier. But I think the getting it into an incognito mode, EOA, this deposit into your 0ZK address thing is kind of a permanent staple of it, unless you guys want to help me write an Ethereum improvement proposal where we just put this thing into the substrate of Ethereum. I think that'd be really cool. Maybe that's if I could have one wish of my beloved Ethereum, it would have a private EOA that I could use. So maybe I'll submit that EIP.
There you go.
That would be awesome.
Speaking of privacy, I mean, there's a lot of ways that people are trying to achieve privacy, right? So you mentioned Monero, Zcash. So there's those. There's other L1 projects. We had Ironfish, is that right, on the pod earlier this year. There's Mixer services. So I guess the question from your perspective at Railgun, does everyone have a role to play in these different ways? Are these other concepts, are they competition? Like, how do you view it?
I, as a person, right, I think that privacy is important. So like, if it, let's say it was hypothetically a zero-sum game and anything went out and like people got privacy, this is a huge win. It's a massive win, right? This is a very, I'm personally a ethos-driven individual, right? I want this to be something that is seen as a public good that people need and deserve, and like, they have access to. Like, that's the most important part. So like, I see like people who work on things like Ironfish, Zcash, Monero, the new privacy pools thing that's coming up that Amin and like Moloch DAO are working on. I see this stuff as like added assurance that something's going to work out, right? And so like, I would call them like brothers in arms, not really competition in that same regard. So there's also a lot of like collaboration in like the privacy ecosystem. So like people talk a lot, like there's like a zero knowledge Telegram group where people share ideas who are working on very different protocols all over, right? So there's people in there from like Aztec, there's people in there who work on things like DarkFi or Manta, or the list goes on. Like, all of these different protocols are all coming together on these like different platforms and like communicating on like, oh, how did you do this really esoteric cryptographic primitive on your protocol? And it's like, oh, we did it like this. And someone else chimes in, it's like, oh, but if you do it like this, it has better gas efficiency. Like, so there's like really cool Giga Chad, like privacy nerds, like all working together. And so I don't think it's a zero-sum game either. I think, these aren't like mutually exclusive. So like a lot of privacy technology sort of like builds and like stacks upon each other. So like things like Waku, which supports the status messaging system that's really private and encrypted. Railgun uses that tech infrastructure. Or things like NIM, for example, like those guys are working on a more like networking perspective. And so like protecting like the privacy stack up into the smart contract point. So the list goes on. So like, there's definitely different things that kind of intermingle and can like intercooperate with each other, but even things that don't, I think that it's great. I hope something wins out. I think it'd be really cool if Railgun was the thing. And I think that if it were zero sum, like if something went out, that's great. But I don't think that's the case. I think that like they can all live in they can live together. So like, Zcash and Monero have both been around for a very long time, and like one hasn't died because of the other's existence. And so I think that they're better because of it, right? Competition, breeds excellence. And so, we'll kind of see like this arms race iterative process, and like, hopefully, it'll get baked into DeFi as a permanent staple.
So Alan, one of the worst things about predictions is that they can get dug up and they live on. As an example, Alf and I did some predictions earlier this year about what 2023 may look like in the world of crypto. Some were correct, some we'll see. We've got about 2 months to land. The reason I bring this up, on another podcast that you recorded earlier this year, you said that 2023 would be the year of privacy integration. So do you think that prediction has lived up now that we're in late 2023?
Man, great question. So like talking specifically about Railgun, if we reflect on 2022, the contracts across the deployments that existed at the time did just shy of $50 million in transaction volume. And in that like calendar year, right? So if we look at this calendar year, in fact, the month of October did $50 million in transaction volume just in one month.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
which is huge, right?
Yeah.
In fact, so if we look at this calendar year, it's right at $565 million worth of transaction volume. So like 10x in transaction volume, right? Not quite like a hyperbolic, move, but definitely a really, really great improvement on the anonymity set for the contracts across the now 4 deployments. And so like transaction volume up, TVL has never been higher. I think it's some X factor. You can look it up on the Dune dashboard. Maybe we can put that in the show links for people to look at this time if they would like to. And in terms of the interactions, or like the integrations, I should say, let's think about it. Right, there is Coinly, there is ENS, Unstoppable Domains. You could use QuickSwap, SushiSwap, 0x, which is like Matcha, so like the DEX aggregator. There's Beefy, which is really, really cool. And so we went from just being able to do swaps to like being able to interact with 7 or 8 different protocols. I might be forgetting one currently in my mind. And there's a lot of really cool things being worked on already for other type integrations. So there's people working on an Aave integration, which is super cool. I mean, like private Aave is going to be really sick. Maybe we'll like coin it Prave or something. It'll be really, really funny, right? But there's also people who are working on a request, something like less like DeFi, more like payments infrastructure. There's people working on a request finance integration. So like there's never been more people interested in the SDKs than there have been like today. And so I mean, I wish it was as cool as like I thought it was going to be, but I think we're definitely well on the way in terms of like trends for the protocol. So like in a market where liquidity is down like what 60, 70%, like Railgun volume up 10x is it's not a bad place to be.
What's the next 1 to 3 years, let's say, of Railgun development? What's on the roadmap, and what do you guys still are excited about pushing forward and improving upon?
So there are some really cool things. There's been a lot of chatter and a lot of like research from contributors around things like they're calling it like V3, and this will be a like better version of Railgun that should make it easier to integrate a lot of protocols. It should be cheaper. It should be even more safe than it's ever been. And I think most importantly, it'll be like a lot more gas efficient, which is really, really cool. And so like a lot of the research that's being poured into Railgun, and probably will be continued to be poured into Railgun, is like, how do we make like this on-chain zero knowledge type transaction like easier and cheaper to use? Because that's where you'll start to get like more and more adoption. And there are some really cool things going on around the accumulator. I won't get in the weeds of that because we could probably have a whole nother episode on like why a new accumulator makes sense, but there's a new research on an accumulator, which is really, really cool. The thing that I'm really excited about, though, is there was a paper that was released by Vitalik Amin and this guy. I think it's Jakob, maybe it's Jacob. Maybe he doesn't use the soft J. If he doesn't, I'm sorry. But they wrote a white paper around this really cool thing. It's sort of like a assurance mechanism for these private transaction systems like Railgun, right? And contributors have been working on this thing now for almost 10 months, and it's going to be deployed really, really soon. So I'm very, very excited about that, because what it'll allow you to do is like prove that you are a good actor in the privacy system. And so like these further like tools that allow like would-be privacy users, good actors, feel comfortable using these tools, coming to fruition. This is all really, really exciting. So like continue research into like these sort of like assurance mechanisms and like different like compliance mechanisms, if you will, around privacy tools. I think is going to be really, really exciting. And so I'm looking forward to that. And moreover, I think the integration side of things is going to be really interesting once V3 comes out. I'm really excited to see things like private perps. I think that'll be really cool. So being able to use things like GMX privately is going to be super sick. I think that like it'll make the marketplace a lot more exciting if you can have some privacy on these particular protocols. And so I'm excited for private perps. There's some people working on private stablecoin minting, which I think is really sick. And so I think there's a lot in store, especially over the next year. And, I would like to see more wallet integrations as well. So I don't want to get like too like esoteric in my predictions, but I think that that's where I see it. It's furthering the protocol in, gas savings and like lowering the barrier for entry to develop with it. It's more integrations, and then it's more features that allow good actors to feel comfortable using the system.
Well, Alan, like we've identified earlier in this conversation, I mean, what you and the team are working on is so important. It's so essential, not just for protection of people, but also I think for onboarding, like you identified, the fact that if more people are going to come into this space, we have to have this type of privacy that exists because there's too many risks otherwise. So we're excited to see what happens in the future. But before we let you go, we like to end every episode of Show Me the Crypto with the same 3 questions we ask every single guest. It's a segment we call You Had Me at Crypto. Ulf is going to ask you those questions.
All right.
Alan, you ready?
I don't know.
Well, we'll get into it, whether you know if you're ready or not. The first question, who's your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
Oh, that's a great question. Who's my favorite person to follow? Vitalik's such a cliche answer, but it's always really great to read like his various really in-depth papers and things like this. And so I think it's probably is like corny and like, do a lot of people say Vitalik? Should I pick somebody else?
You can pick him, but to answer your question, he is the number one. Not that like by 80% or something, I'd say maybe like 7% of people have said Vitalik, but that's still the number one answer.
I think that just speaks volumes to, that he's that influential. He's
a great answer.
Out that great content.
Yeah, he has like a lot of really cool things that he says. There's things that I agree with. There's things that I don't agree with. But he's a very interesting and like considered person. He has a lot of esteem in the market. I guess like if I had to like pick something that's not Vitalik, I'm a big fan of following it's the Desert Lynx. His name's Joel. And Joel's really cool because like he's been living like in crypto for like 7 years or something like this, like a long time. And so like he's like not just talking about it, he's being about it. I think that's a really, really cool and like admirable goal. And so like I would probably shout out Joel. He's like another, I was just like looking at my likes, right? And like, I've liked a couple of his posts because he talks about the different things that he's doing to like be successful at like living in crypto and like debanking himself. And so like that's something I would pick.
I remember hearing about him a couple of years ago. I think I reached out to get him on the pod. We didn't, but that's a good future guest because that's an interesting dude for sure.
Cool conversation for sure. All right, second question. What will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from today?
10 years from today. All right, let's think about this. Moon soon, guys. Moon soon. I would, man, I'm probably going to sound like the most pessimistic person ever. Like, I mean, maybe like, maybe 250. It'll be like really binary. It'll be like 250K, or like the security mechanisms around Bitcoin will disallow it to be successful into the future. So it's going to be like super high or zero. That's what I believe. It's a big binary type thing. I'm definitely not a Bitcoin maxi, but the hive mind can drive that price super high into the future.
Yeah, and we've had kind of that mix. A couple people have said it's either going to be this or it's going to be nothing, basically. So
I feel like given Railgun's built on an EVM and compatible with EVMs, we got to ask the Ethereum question and say, where will that be? What will the price of Ethereum be 10 years from now?
Oh man, so I would predict it to be $10,000 to $15,000 per ETH. Not financial advice, of course, but like that's
less binary. Both up.
That's what I think. Again, it could be the same kind of thing, right? Something could come out that'll be the next killer app, but like we're starting to see like a lot of like the L2ification of like ETH, and like people are pivoting to like not be a standalone ivory tower, single chain, but actually migrate into like that ecosystem. And so, I think it could be the case that like Ethereum does win out, at least in the DeFi mechanism. And if it does, it'll be, ultrasound money, right? It'll be burnt to death, and, we'll see a good mooning on that.
All right. Third and final question. What is the most underrated project in crypto?
Other than Railgun.
Railgun for sure. That's a great question. I think that like in terms of underrated, oh gosh. I think that like things that are like really boring in crypto are like really slept on. And so there's like a lot of like crypto debit card type protocols that are out there, immersive being one of them. The list goes on. There's like tons of them. I think there's a Monerium as well is another one. It's on Gnosis chain. There's a lot of these protocols out there that exist that I think are really, really cool and like deep value that like can help you like debank yourself. And I think that those are like the things that are slept on the most. Like people get really excited about like new derivatives and new perps and like the new way to like leverage gamble their money away. But I think that like the more like boring use cases of crypto are going to like see adoption, are going to do more for adoption than like any of the esoteric finance stuff. And so I would say like, be on the lookout for like crypto debit cards, things like Request Finance, which is sort of like a QuickBooks of crypto, which I think is really, really cool. Like those like debank protocols are the things that are the most appealing to me, because I think that that's the kind of thing that I could explain to my mom. You know what I mean? If I think about it, it's like, like you said it earlier, we need like really easy things for people to do. And like, that's the easy things for people to do: a debit card, a credit card, and, something very simple like the QuickBooks of crypto. I think that that's like the top thing. So yeah, probably Monerium being one, immersive being another, and then Request Finance I think is another one that's not talked about enough.
Awesome. Well, Alan, this has been a great conversation. I mean, I think for some, they may not think of privacy as the most interesting subject, but I think you've done a great job in just explaining everything, talking about the importance of it. Thank you so much for joining Ulf and I on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, guys. It's been a blast.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.